All right, let's do this. Peanut, if you're staying in the room, no talking. Hello, and welcome to the PhotoWork podcast, the talking, touchy-feely version of my book, PhotoWork, 40 Photographers on Process and Practice. I'm Sasha Wolf, as usual, recording from the Bearsville Theater in Woodstock, New York. Thank you, Bearsville Theater. And I'm joined, as always, thank God, by my friend and producing partner, I think you just heard him giggle, Michael, hard CH, Chauvin Dalton, everyone. Michael Chauvin Dalton. Hello, Michael.
Well, hello, and yes, thank you for the pronunciation of my last name. Often when people see my last name for the first time, they soften it up to a Chauvin and make it sound extra fancy.
Yeah, I mean, I've had people say to me, like, you know, in reference to you, they've said, so how did you start working with Michael Chauvin Dalton? And I'm like, I don't work with Michael Chauvin Dalton. Don't ever say that again and get out of my sight, you lunatic.
Boy, if I did that, I'd have nobody around me.
Don't you try and fancy up my friend Michael.
That's right.
Good golly.
I'm a man of the people.
Yes, exactly. Listen, I come from a family of union organizers, for God's sake. So, Michael, I just want to acknowledge something because I feel a little bit like it's elephanty in the room, which is that I want to just tell people, this show is going to drop after Election Day. It's going to drop on Thursday the 5th. And I don't know if we're going to know who the next president is or not, but, we're either going to be, devastated or hugely relieved or in some state of limbo. But right now, and we are in a state of limbo right now, but just to be precise, we're recording on Monday the 2nd, so it's the day before official election day. And so we can't really speak to any of that because we don't know what's going to happen.
No, we don't know. All we can do is hope that everyone is doing okay. That's the best we can hope for right now.
Yep.
And that you all voted.
Trying times. Yeah, you better have all voted. If you didn't vote, then I revoke your permission to listen to my podcast. God damn it. So moving away from politics, because that really I'll wind up crying. I just want to remind our listeners of the very generous offer from Aperture. So if folks go to Aperture website to pick up some books, which I strongly recommend, that if they put in PhotoWork 30, the discount code when they go to checkout, they'll get 30% off.
Yeah, it's, I just picked up Kwame Brathwaite, Black is Beautiful. It's got text by Tanisha Ford and Deborah Willis. I think it was already on sale, but I put in the code and that 30% discount is really nice. It's quite generous.
That's a huge discount. I mean, it is really generous. So thank you, Aperture. It's like just a really nice gesture on their part to support the show. And obviously they publish the book, so we're sort of connected. It's a nice organization to be connected to. I'm really proud of that. So anyway. Thank you, Aperture. So, Michael, what did you think of today's episode? It was, as you know, a conversation with my old friend, the photographer Alejandro Cartagena.
There was so much in this episode that I loved. I'm nervous about giving too much away, but the way Alejandro packs so much into his responses, into the conversation you have, was really inspirational. The way he weaves together his inspiration and how he works and the connections he makes from personal experience in his work, it was so energizing.
Yeah, he's he's sort of one of these people that you would describe as having a sort of childlike enthusiasm. And I personally find it incredibly infectious, and infectious is probably not a great word to use during a pandemic, but I find it a wonderful quality. And I talk less, you're welcome, during this episode because Alejandro is able to sort of just really hold forth. I mean, he's he has such a command of like his motivations, his practice, it's like, I just feel like he's sort of not left any stone unturned in the way he thinks about making work. So he's just able to really dig in. I mean, I loved this talk. I found it, I learned so much, and I've known him for a really long time, but I learned so much.
Yeah.
And, Michael, let me just also say, just suggest to our listeners that if you're not familiar with Alejandro's work, he really gets into a lot of specific projects, and I definitely think it would really help to have a better handle. I mean, he's incredibly prolific. You don't have to look at everything, but I would go to his website and really try and familiarize yourself. Look, he has so many. There's so many people who, when I told them I was talking to him, were like, oh my God, I love him. I love his work. So obviously a lot of people already know it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, just want to recommend that to people.
Yeah, we'll link to his website in the episode notes for sure. And just one last note, if you're a photographer who's just starting out, or if you're a photographer like me who's been doing it a while, but maybe, the past few months have been feeling a little exhausted, I think this show will energize you. I think this show will make you want to go out and make work. I think he has just a lot of good practical advice for being self-motivated.
Yep, definitely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Well, on that note, Michael, if you don't mind, please take it away.
Oh, my pleasure. And here's your conversation with Alejandro Cartagena.
Alejandro, welcome to the PhotoWork podcast, my friend. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this with me.
Thank you, Sasha. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. We've known each other for so long, so I'm still excited to talk to you every time we talk.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking you and I go back to 2007, my first gallery space. You used to come visit me when you were in town, which always made me very happy. So yeah, we've known each other about 13 years now. So, well, I love you and I love your work, and, getting ready. It's interesting because I sort of thought I was, fairly up to date on what you were doing, but getting ready for today's conversation and spending a lot of time on your website and also looking at some other interviews you've done and whatnot. But I was definitely, I guess I didn't realize how prolific you've sort of become. I mean, you were always prolific, and I do remember that. I mean, you're the guest that's now officially taken me the most time to prepare for.
That's good.
Holy cow. So, yeah, no, it was really fun. I mean, I had a wonderful time. But, yeah, I mean, one thing that just really occurred to me that I don't think I've ever thought about it just quite so cut and dry like this before, but I'm going to just ask you if this feels right to you. I realize you're sort of just, right, you are a topologist.
Yeah.
Does that, that's really what you are. Like, you're not really a documentary photographer. I mean, you're not even like a conceptual documentary photographer. I mean, you're like a man who goes out and gathers evidence of something with your camera. I mean, does that sound right?
Yeah, I mean, it does. And I think nobody has ever put it that way, but I think you're on the spot. I enjoy the photographing act, going out there and taking pictures. And I think that is the starting point for what I think I've become to consider myself more as an author, where, there are several stages of my process, and the most photographic part of it is, of course, going out and photographing. But then I've also jumped that stage and gone out looking for images and not only taking photographs. So in a sense, that first part of gathering is, I think, what still excites me the most, because it's where discoveries happen. But then I've also really become enamored with the post-production or the post-photographic in that there's also meaning to be made after the image has been done or the image has been gathered. So yes, I am very much a gatherer in a very broad sense, I would say.
You're not a gatherer like Lee Friedlander or Gary Winogrand or some street photographer going out and just gathering snapshots of.
Yeah.
You are a gatherer of really specific.
Yeah.
Under very specific parameters within each body of work.
Yeah, I have tried to just wander the world and just photograph. And it's not that I can't do it. It's just somehow there is something in the way I learned photography and the way I learned how to do art, that there was always this big subject matter in which everything falls into. And those subject matters have changed during my years of practice, but there's always this big umbrella that, if people know my work, most of the time has some social connection to it, but not necessarily all the time. But there's always that umbrella under which I practice what I do. And I don't know, maybe I'm closed-minded, maybe I'm a bit square, but it feels really natural to work that way. And I mean, I love work that is just about nothing and it's just, exploration, visual exploration and photographic exploration. I love that. I mean, I love Gary Winogrand, Lee Friedlander. That type of image making is really, really exciting, but it's not maybe what I strive for in my practice, though I've done it, but it's not my thing.
When I'm looking at your work, I feel like I'm in the company of someone who becomes unbelievably curious about something and cannot let it go until it's just fully exhausted. It feels obsessive in the best, I mean that as a compliment, but that's how I feel when I'm looking at your work. I'm like, oh, Alejandro is obsessed. And it's just really neat. I mean, I really enjoy it because I actually think there is a certain looseness, like somehow, it doesn't become too hard-edged. Like there's still so much play in the work.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do. I feel like I'm with someone who just has to keep scratching this itch until.
Yeah, till you get somewhere. Last year, was it last year? Oh my God, 2020. It's fumbling my idea of years, but I think it was last year. 2019, I had a show at a gallery, and the amount of work I put into that show, that was, I think, my first solo show since I had gone through a massive turmoil, a personal turmoil. So I really worked hard for that show. I think I finished doing like 140 pieces for one solo show in a gallery, in a 4-wall gallery. And packing everything and shipping was like, oh my God, this is a lot of work. But then when I saw it hung, and I sent the plans of how to hang it and everything, it like I understood myself, like, you really are an obsessive and you really are like, you're pushing yourself all the time. And I felt so happy because it worked, it really worked. Like I saw the show and then it's like, I'm not throwing flowers at myself, but this is, you have to throw it at yourself because nobody else does. But I was like, I've never seen a solo show in a gallery space like this. Because this is almost for a museum show. It's so much work. You normally show maybe 20 pieces, the best 20 pieces, but this was like massive. This was like, okay, I did everything I could and it's up on the wall and it felt amazing to put that effort in and have it, look amazing. Anyways, I thought that story really tells that, I am obsessive.
Yeah, no, but I think like anyone just going to your website and looking through your work, you see that obsessiveness. Yeah. And again, to me, that's a compliment. Yeah. I've been called obsessive, and I'm like, thank you very much. And you see just this like unbelievable curiosity, like all these things, like the really active mind. You really see and feel all that when you're looking through your work. Let's just back up a little bit. Can you just give our listeners just a little snapshot of your journey of how you got to where you are today?
Sure. Well, I started in photography as a digitizer in an archive. So that was like my first job and, inquiry into photography. I used to work in the service industry in hotels and restaurants, and I just got fed up with that and just quit everything and just, said, okay, I'm going to do photography. Took a couple of workshops.
And I'm sorry, Alejandro, you're from northern Mexico?
Yeah, I was born in Dominican Republic and then moved to Mexico in 1990. And I've lived here ever since. And I lived some time in Canada, some time in the US, but most of the time here in Monterrey, Mexico, very close to the border to Texas.
Yep.
And, I was a very playful kid. I love skateboarding. I've always been creative. I studied music, loved collecting stuff. I remember I had a lot of comic books when I was a little kid, collected watches, collected hats.
Well, you're still collecting,
exactly,
by the way, in case that's not clear.
Yeah. And photography was always there in a sense. My dad, he was not an active photographer, but what was in my house was a lot of photo albums. And when we moved from Dominican Republic to here to Mexico, that was my only contact with my past. And I was 13, so it was not like a really nice moment to leave all your friends and your family and start from zero. So the photo album, my family album, was like the place I would go all the time. And that's why kind of my journey in photography started in the archive as a digitizer of other people's work. I would scan images that from the 19th century up to 20th century photography. And then in my personal work, it was about me, so I started photographing myself and then I started, looking outwards, looking at the people that I live with, because even after more than 15 years when I started photographing, I still didn't feel that I was Mexican in a way. I was still battling with that, being Dominican and being Mexican at the same time. And so the archive, the past, scratching the past, rethinking the past, reimagining the past was something that really I felt really attuned with. And eventually, I started looking outwards, the people, the landscape. I was really inspired and motivated by the archive images that I was scanning because these were the photographers who somehow captured the place I lived in for more than 100 years. So I was looking at the evolution of my city through photography and living in the present where everything had changed compared to the photographs that I was scanning. So I think that really influenced what I was going to photograph in my career. So I was scanning studio portraits. I was scanning images of new development, industrial developments, and all these were professional photographers. But in my mind, they were photographers. These were the people who created the visual identity of where I live and who I'm supposed to be. So I don't know. It was a really interesting way to grow up photographically instead of, going to university and having a degree in photography. This was this was my school, looking at old photographs and classifying them and taking care of them as objects, because this is a really professional archive where everything's cleaned, everything's all information about the work is very precious and taken care of. And so I grew up that way. And I've done, I think, a complete circle to my last work is about building my own archive. So I've gone out and bought photographs in Mexico City, in outside dump sites, in markets, wherever I could find old photographs. And I built my own archive, and then I did something with that archive. It's a full circle. So I started with me, looking at myself. Then I look upwards, people, the space, the landscapes, and eventually looking at photographs from the past of Mexico and appropriating them as mine and creating some kind of photo sculpture, if you want. And right now, like my latest projects, I'm looking back at my own archive, like photographs that I've taken over the years that I feel have somehow, matured into something. And with my eye now, I can see things that I couldn't see before. So, and because I'm not out photographing that much, this looking at my archive is just sitting there and rethinking it has been my safe haven for this pandemic, and it's beautiful. I have 2 book projects that are almost finished for next year, so it's really exciting.
I mean, it's interesting because you're a contributor to my book PhotoWork, and thank you very much. I love your whole contribution to the book. But you say question 10 is, do you ever revisit a series that's already been exhibited or published to shoot more or add to it? And you say, I try not to. They can become ghosts and it can get messy. Yeah. I get that. But, based on what you just said, and then based on the fact that I know you re-edited your book Carpoolers 3 different times, maybe you like the idea of that, but you can't quite keep to it. I mean, which is fine, but it sounds like you're really getting more and more comfortable with reopening things and recontextualizing them and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, I think I do believe what I said there in that interview. And because the projects that I'm looking at right now, they're closed. I mean, they're done. I'm not out re-photographing. That's what I maybe wanted to imply, in that once I'm done with the urge of thinking of that project or thinking about that idea that I was photographing and researching, there's a moment where I say, okay, this thing is done. Now, that doesn't mean that it's out to the public. Sometimes I've been very lucky that I'm super active all the time. So I'm doing, 5-6 projects at the same time. So sometimes some of those projects that I just finished, they're not ready. Yeah, they're just not ready. I'm too close to them. So I let them sit for years. So like right now here, I'm looking at this book I'm doing about traveling from the suburbs to Monterrey. And that project I finished photographing, I think it was 2015. But I've included several of those images in some of the books and exhibitions, but it wasn't ready to look at it as a product, as a cultural product. So that's what I'm doing. That doesn't mean that I was out photographing or out thinking about it. It was like, that project is done. That ghost is in the closet and it doesn't need to come out.
Right.
So I think in that sense, I try to work like that. But there are several projects that are still little ghosts. Like there's one that I've been doing, I think, for 10 years, and I just haven't been able to finish it, and it just comes back, and 3 years I got a grant for it, and that really helped to push it forward. But then the pandemic hit, and this year was the year I was going to do the last little bit of the project and make my, the book proposal. And I just haven't been able to move it forward. Like it just doesn't feel right to look at it right now. I don't know why, but then, because I have other projects moving around, it's easy to just say, hey, can you wait?
Yeah, of course.
And I'll keep on looking at the one that really excites me right now. So I don't know.
It sounds to me like, a really sort of full and exciting life. I mean, I know that you're making all this. I know, you just described it a little bit, but for our listeners, like you're not only using old pictures that you buy and collect, old vintage pictures, snapshots of people and families and whatnot, but you're also using a knife and cutting them out and creating sort of just outlines and doing a lot of, as you said, little sculptural pieces. And so your work is going in different directions. Yeah. And I know that that's not a new direction. You're going to stop doing your older style of work. It's just a new branch on the tree. Yeah. And I mean, it seems like an incredibly satisfying life, and there's a lot of activism in your work too. I mean, you're sort of an artist activist, in my opinion. And I mean, is this a satisfying life? Do you feel like, this is what I meant to do, and I feel deeply grateful, or do you ever wish you were something else? Or
wow, what a difficult question. But yeah, I mean, I am doing exactly what I dreamed of when I said I'm not gonna do the service thing anymore. And I remember talking to Christina, my wife at that moment, and telling her, oh man, I wish I could just think of projects, go out, take pictures of them, and then, do books with them, and then do exhibitions, and then, talk to people about the things that I'm thinking, and share it in lectures and conversations with people from other disciplines. And that is exactly what I'm doing. And, that was my dream back in 2006, 2005. And, I've been super lucky, and I've worked my ass off to get there. And that is exactly what I do. And I jump around with the things I'm doing because, I talked about this with somebody a few years back, and you are your worst demon, at being an artist, because there's nobody asking for stuff. I mean, it's not like I have, I'm in this super huge gallery like Goshen or something like that, where, I'm sure that there are some, you need to produce stuff to be in that kind of brand, But for me, it's like I'm here in the middle of nowhere. I'm not even in Mexico City. I'm like there's nothing happening that big here in Monterrey. So this is me making myself think that I'm doing important things for myself first and foremost. And if those things aren't exciting, if I'm not on the edge, then I will not get up. I will not do anything, because nobody's asking for these things. Nobody's asking for a book of Alejandro Cartagena. Nobody's asking for an exhibition of my work. I think that happens when people see that I'm pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. And that's something that's kind of difficult to live with, because if you don't structure your life to make yourself work that way, you can last, you can have a bunch of projects that are unfinished, and yes, they're good, but if you don't finish them, if you don't try to publish them, if you don't try to show them, nobody's going to want to see it. So I don't know, it sounds very satisfying to do what I do, but it's a lot of work in the mind. It's like, it's a constant conflict. Let's put it that way. My life is a constant conflict, and it's exciting, but at the same time, it's really hard.
Yep. I understand everything you just said. I also want to just say to you and to our people listening that, even if you had, there isn't a lot that would change that. Let me put it that way. The artist's life is the artist's life. And whether you're super, super, super famous or no one knows who you are, you're sort of, it is at the end of the day about self-motivation.
Yeah.
And it's very inward, and there's no yellow brick road to follow. You have to just make your own path and figure out, what success looks like, and you can steer towards that. I mean, I always say to people, to me, success is being respected by the people I respect. And the number one person I respect is me. So,
yeah, exactly.
It's like,
yeah, that's so important.
But for sure, it's like there's this group of people that I really respect, and I want them to respect what I'm doing. And I don't really go much beyond that. I mean, everything else is just gravy, but I'm sort of not pointing my ship in a million different places. It's like, okay, there's the North Star. I'm just going to go that way. But yeah, it is. It's like it has to be. I think anything in the arts, for the most part, is really self-guided. Yeah. I mean, my life is really self-guided. People were not buying much work during the pandemic, so I started a podcast. Yeah. I mean, it's this is our life.
Yeah. I think we both have this sense of urgency that, as much as I know that you want to be selling because that's what you do, I've always felt this about you, and it is that you're committed. You have this thing that you can't let go. I mean, you love photography, you love the things you do, the things you promote. And if again, that's your obsession, if there's not that behind everything that you're doing, you end up doing something different. It's just inevitable. Sometimes, it's really sad because some people are in a really bad position and, they have more difficulties to actually pursue what they want to do, but you have to find a way to make it work. Like I was doing the 9-to-5 job, digitizing photographs, and my colleagues that worked with me in that photography center, they were photographers, but they didn't have that drive to go out after finishing working and going to photograph for hours until the sun goes down. And that was me. I was working two jobs because I just couldn't get enough. And everything that I was winning as a digitizer, I was buying film and printing and doing stuff to excite myself and take my projects to a place where they felt, that they were good for me.
Well, also, let me just underline, you just said excite myself. And I think that's the thing. It's like, I always find that the people who are the, sort of the happiest artist warriors are the people who are ultimately trying to make themselves really happy.
Yeah.
As opposed to some outside person or thing, institution, whatever, that they have no control over. But as you said, it's like, I know for myself personally, like I'm always brainstorming on a million different ideas I have that all have to do with, photography in the community and whatnot, because I just love it so much and it makes me so happy. And it's like, what can I do today that's just, will be really fun? I mean, exactly. it's if I didn't feel that way, I would stop. But, I do think that when people get too preoccupied with one specific sort of goal, whether it's to get into a gallery or have a museum show, whatever it is, and they don't get there in some time frame that they think they should, then the mental wheels can fall off. And that's just, usually they're starting from a place of misunderstanding of what this industry is. Let me ask you, because I really want to talk about something because I quote you a lot to people. So cool. Also in the book, I have a question in the book where I ask, what are the key elements that must be present for you when you're creating a body of work? And I'm going to read your answer. It's a bit long, but here goes. I think it's really important. Okay. You say, I think in layers. The more layers a project has, the more possibility there is that one of those layers will relate to someone. Something like this.
Yeah.
The project needs to be aesthetically, technically, conceptually, and historically relevant, have a personal connection, pull towards some kind of social commentary, be able to show personal and artistic vulnerability, and so on. Some of the layers are just sparks of interest that will allow a later reading of what I'm trying to present as subject matter or theme. Certain viewers will be interested in the technical aspects of the work to start and expectantly move into the other layers of meaning, history, or narrative involved in the book, exhibition, or site. I feel something worthy happens when one of these layers is perceived, and I also hope that people will find more of the threads that are offered, though I never know if that will happen. In the end, my own personal commitment is to make the work as layered as possible, and in doing so, I also make the best work I think I can. And that's just one of the most, that's just one of my favorite answers in the book. I think it's just really beautiful, Alejandro. So thank you so much for just sharing that with everyone. But I also absolutely agree with everything you're saying. And could you just talk about that a bit? Because I just feel like that people just, especially young artists, just don't realize that they have to stop relying on the camera.
Yeah.
And instead they have to really dig deep to create real authorship. And authorship means making a lot of different choices. And in making those choices, you add those layers.
Yeah.
Anyway, can you talk about that?
Yeah. Wow. I really enjoyed you reading that. And I heard myself saying those things. And I think I really, again, I've been really blessed with the way I learned photography and how it basically made me commit to being a photographer and commit to creating work that has those different approaches. And I'll spell them out. I mean, historical relevance. And it's not that, okay, I'm going to do work and I know it's going to be historically relevant. It doesn't work that easily, but you have to have a sense of what has happened photographically around you, locally and in the medium itself. I think those things create confidence in you as a creator, because you know that somehow you are developing a story, developing a history that had been addressed by somebody else in the past, and your approach and your commitment is to develop that voice that somebody else had, or those questions that somebody else posed in front of a public. So starting there, the context, the way you think your work is gonna insert itself locally, and then I don't like the word universally, but in the rest of the medium. I think that is the starting point for responsibility as a creator. And I think the layer idea that you read has to do with responsibility. It's that I know what I did technically. I know what I did aesthetically. I know how the work resonates historically. I know how the work resonates socially. I know how the work resonates conceptually with my peers, with other work. And if you take responsibility of those decisions, then when you're presenting the work, it's an intuitive thing, but it just feels that the work it's backed up. There's something there behind it. It's not just fluff. It's not like I had this idea, let's do it, boom, and that's it, And there are beautiful ideas like that, but they just disintegrate. And if you look, you did look at my website, there are so many interconnections between my different projects between the years. And it's not by accident. It's because I'm always thinking of how to deepen the stories that I've presented. And sometimes there are stories that contradict each other. And sometimes there are like aesthetic methodologies and aesthetic presentations that contradict my work. But that is always, and I think I did talk about it in the interview, is about vulnerability. This is you saying, hey, I think that this work works this way, but in 5 years, I also think it could work this way. And you mentioned the 3 editions of the carpoolers of the book. That is vulnerability right there. That is me saying this work can be read in these 3 ways. And there are many more ways. And I'm willing to say and to present these 3 types of readings for one same project. And I think if you don't put yourself out there that way, you will get bored and you will just do something different. Let's put it that way. In simple terms, this is my opportunity to push myself so that it's exciting to think, oh, I'm going to do a book. Oh, I'm going to go out photographing. Oh, I'm going to, edit something today. How do I make that exciting in the long term, in the long run? And so, yeah, I hope I kind of covered what I said. And
No, it's a wonderful answer.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just loving, I'm listening to you, and I'm just so caught up in what you're saying. I was just thinking that for people who are listening, can you explain carpoolers and what you just referenced? I referenced it, then you referenced it, but let's help our listeners out a bit here. Can you tell people what carpoolers is and the 3 edits, what you're talking about?
Sure. So the Carpoolers project was a body of work I did in 2011. I was just finishing, and I'll put this a little bit of background. I had just finished the Suburbia Mexicana book in 2010. It came out early to 2011. And the Suburbia Mexicana project was about the development of the metro area of Monterrey. Thousands and thousands of houses being built. The city was growing outwards. And the Carpoolers project was a series of images, very, how would you put this? Kind of like a typology of these people coming from the outskirts of the city into the southern part of the city where there's a lot of construction work. And they would gather in the suburbs in the north and jump in the back of trucks and drive to these sprawling, really wealthy suburbs in the south. So I photographed the men in the process of going to work. A lot of them are sleeping. Sometimes they're cramped up with their power tools, or there are maybe 5 or 6 people in the same back of the truck. So they're basically, spooning each other, and it's all set in one specific spot here in Monterrey. And I photographed for 1 year, and I would go from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m, which is the schedule where they were heading to work. After 9, there was barely any of them. And of that project came out a book that I published in 2014. And
can I just interject that you were a bird's eye view looking down at these people in the back of the truck as they were driving on a highway.
Yes.
So you're like a bird's eye view. Okay,
yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was a bird's eye view. I was standing on a pedestrian overpass that crosses the highway from one side to another. So I'm looking north, and they're coming towards me. And when I saw the front cabin packed with people, I assumed that there would be more people on the bed of the truck. So I would jump to that lane from the pedestrian bridge. And once they're coming underneath me, boom, I took a photograph. And that was my first project that I did with a digital camera. So I played the game that I was only going to take 1 or 2 pictures at most. So I maybe have a 20% success in capturing them because they were going fast, they were going slow.
Right.
It wasn't an easy project to do, but I didn't want the camera to do the work. I really wanted to do it. So it was like 1 picture. If I got it, I got it. If not, too bad. And eventually, it became a typology of carpoolers, if you want to put it that way. And I started to show the work in exhibitions, in fairs. And then I wanted to do a book, and it was so difficult, Sasha, to do a book. It was because they're very simple images. It's just people in the back of trucks, and yeah, they're really beautiful and they have humor to them. But to do a book, after 5 spread, it was like, okay, I know what this book is about. It's dull, it becomes boring. And that's when, the idea of the photo book, this space where things happen that don't happen on the wall happens. You mix design with that. You mix the paper, the scale, and the sequence. And so one of the things that really started to move the project forward as a book was me getting into one of those beds of trucks and doing the route of what these guys lived and photographing what they saw when they were going to work. So I was photographing the sky, the bridges, whatever was in front of me, helicopters, and then taking those images and intercutting them with the images of me looking at them down. So, so
Yep.
that created some kind of energy in the book where, you know, it's not only about looking at them and like pinpointing, oh, look at them. It's like, and it's also about, this is what it feels to drive to work this way. And suddenly, wow, it became a photo book. It became something very unique that I wasn't doing on the wall. And then the paper, like the paper sizes, there are different paper sizes. So there's cadence, like musical cadences happening here and there. And then it just really worked, you know, like as a photo book. And I was really lucky, and the book sold out in 3 months. And, you know, people were still asking for more books. And it took me another year to think of how to edit and sequence what I had already taken a year to edit and sequence. And I decided to do it, but I said, I'm not going to copy paste the same project. You know, it just doesn't feel exciting. It just doesn't feel fair for somebody to buy the book. It's like, well, if you're going to pay money again for a book, I'll at least make it different and exciting, you know? So
that's definitely a unique point of view.
Yeah. So I changed it up. I printed the first one I printed here in Mexico. The second one I printed I think it was in Indonesia. And the third one I printed in Madrid. So, and every one is different. The cover is different. The sequence is different. There are a few images that are new in some of the books that are not on the first book. New in the sense that I didn't use, but I haven't gone to photograph again. So yeah, I mean, it's not that it was a ghost in that I didn't finish the project. It was like, well, you know, this project really talks to people and people are asking for the book, and I'm more than happy to sell the book, but I have to be excited about selling you a book. You know, I'm not in this to make money in the straight business sense. I want to make money because I want to live of this and you know, and do more projects, but I want to do projects that excite me. And that's why that book has been edited 3 times. And the 3 times have been different. Yeah. So
I feel like we've come full circle back to what we were talking about in the beginning about just, you know, how active your mind is. And, you know, I just think it's like, you don't want to be bored, you know, and you just fight back against anything that would just be too mundane, you know? So, but I really love that you did that. I mean, I just think it's just you know, that sort of like frenetic and curious, like, how is this going to turn out? And it's, you know, I think there's a boldness to it that I really respect. And I think it's really important, you know, for artists to not be terrified of a misstep.
Yeah.
You know, let the totality of your output and career trust that it can absorb.
Exactly.
I don't even know what a misstep is, by the way, but let's just say there's a misstep. Like you and your career and the output, what you've put out into the world, can usually absorb it. You know, so it's really important just to let your curiosity go and produce.
You don't know what you'll find. I mean, I think that's the excitement about putting these projects out. That, I mean, Carpoolers for me, that project really changed my life. But in all honesty, I was going to throw that project away. Like I saw the images. I'm like, yeah, you know, I like them, but this just doesn't add up stylistically to what I have been doing. And I just, you know, it was like, and then I put it to sleep for like 3 months. And then it just dawned on me. It's like, where are these guys coming from? Okay, they're coming from the northern suburbs. Wait a minute, I already photographed those suburbs. And where are they going to work? To the southern suburbs. Wait a minute, I photographed that too. And it's like, damn, there it is. That's my link. That's my missing link. That's going to make me okay with showing these images, because they're not, you know, a one-hit wonder thing. This is the continuous narrative that I'm building around this subject matter that I still think needs to be addressed. So I think though you have to be aware of those little nuances between your projects and the in-between projects are going to keep you moving forward. What did you do in one project? What didn't you do in that other project? Can you find something in the middle of those two things? I mean, I think that's very much what I've been doing. And the last work has to do exactly with being an archivist, and actually it's the distrust of the archive. My new work is really much about saying, hey, why are we so attached to the archive? Why do we, it basically like seduces us, and is it the black and white? Is it the sepia tones? Is this the feeling that it's historical and suddenly we don't question anything because it's an old photograph? Oh my God, it has to say the truth or whatever, It was like, wait a minute, I don't know if I believe that too much, or maybe I was just, seduced by photography and its power to seduce you into nostalgia. So I wanted to question that. And that's what I did for 2 years with those cutting out the images. It was like saying, no, I won't let you seduce me. It's like, wait a minute, what are you made of? Let me take these people out. Wait, what is this? What's left? Are you still seducing me? Where's the power in photography? Is it in the object? Is it in the people who were represented in those images? Is it the repetition of how people are composed in a 5x7 image? It's asking questions about the medium itself, because, I was in a really difficult moment personally, and I just questioned everything, my mind, my heart, my practice, and it paid off.
Well, I think that's a great place a natural place to wrap up. I feel like you just said so much that was just so meaningful and helpful and important. And, you're working in a very specific style. And so, your mind is so sui generis. It's so unique. And I certainly, not everyone's going to relate exactly to the way you work, but your, overall sort of way of looking at photography and how it goes out into the world, I think is really beautiful. And thank you so much for sharing, all of your thoughts with me and anyone who's listening.
No, thank you, Sasha.
Hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, well, thanks everyone for listening. Hope you enjoyed. We'll be back with you in a couple of weeks. Stay well. Thanks so much.
PhotoWork with Sasha Wolf is produced by me, Michael Chauvin-Dalton of Real Photo Show. The executive producer is Sasha Wolf, and our theme music is by J. Walter Hawks. You can hear PhotoWork on all your favorite podcast platforms. Please rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Spotify, and be sure to subscribe on any one of those services or wherever you listen to podcasts.